Good morning and welcome back to another episode of the DD Geopolitics podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We recently hit 2 milestones, 20,000 on YouTube, 200,000 on Twitter. Thanks to all of you. Please like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications to this stream. We're currently trying to expand our projects in Yemen, giving clean water to neighborhoods and families with Ramadan coming up as well. If you would like to support, you can donate to it through gdgeopolitics.com, subscribe to our Substack, or we now have Twitter subscriptions available for $2 a month. And all of our monetizations goes towards helping our projects in Syria, Yemen, and Eastern Europe. Today, finally back in the studio is Scott Ritter for our episode, Yankee Go Home. This Yankee is home, apparently. Scott, how was your trip to Russia and Chechnya?
Well, remember, Chechnya is part of the Russian Federation,
Right,
so
right.
it's just a singularity. But no, it was a fantastic trip. It was an extension of the visit I made in May, which in many ways was a journey of discovery. And I continued the journey. I mean, you can't really say you know Russia unless you've experienced Russia during the wintertime. And also, I talked a lot back in May about how impressed I was with Russian culture, and also how Russia has re-embraced religion, the Orthodox faith. If you're a Russian, a Slavic Russian, Islam. If you're a Chechen or a Tatar or any of the other Muslim nationalities that exist in the Russian Federation. And this visit helped drive that home. I was there in Moscow on New Year's Eve. A wonderful time to be in Moscow, to see the city lit up and decorated the way it was, and to experience the chill of minus 28 degrees Celsius. And then I was there for Christmas. On Christmas Eve, I was in the cathedral. I'm horrible with names, but the big cathedral in downtown Moscow next to the Kremlin of the Savior, where Kirill, the patriarch of Russian Orthodox faith, held a Christmas service with all the pageantry and all the glory and all the beauty. But it wasn't just the show that was put on, and I hope I didn't insult anybody by calling it a show. But it's a show. There's a whole dance taking place, movement. It's a pageant with the regalia of the faith. But to see the people around me and how they respond to that, this isn't fake. This isn't me as a child at church while they're singing, sitting there, twiddling my thumbs, waiting for it to end. This was a deeply faithful people. Just caught up in the moment, and that impressed me greatly. And then we went to St. Petersburg that same day. Took the train, and that night we attended the ballet, the Nutcracker, Peter Tchaikovsky's ballet at the in one of the great theaters in St. Petersburg. So to see the Nutcracker performed on Christmas Day in St. Petersburg, if you know anything, Peter Tchaikovsky premiered the Nutcracker in St. Petersburg on Christmas Day in 1892. So to do that and be surrounded by and see the appreciation that these people have about their own culture. I don't claim to be the most cultured person in the world. Ballet isn't necessarily my go-to move on things, but I found myself just enthralled, not only by the performance taken before me, because it was beautiful. They did a really good job. The orchestra was great. The performers were great. Everything was great. But just watching the Russian people as they just sat there and said, "This is ours. This belongs to us. This is who we are." It was a big deal. So that was an important part. But then the other thing about the trip is you never forgot, and you're never allowed to forget, that Russia is a nation at war, not a war against Ukraine, a war against the collective West. And we were planning on celebrating, New Year's in Red Square. That wasn't allowed to happen for security reasons. They were planning on a fireworks show. That didn't happen because of political reasons. You don't want to be seen as having this grand celebration while men are fighting and dying, in the new territories. And so this was a reality. And is enthusiastic and full of life the Russian people were about New Year's and about Christmas, there was also this underlying steely resolve of the people who said we are at war, and we're not intimidated by this war. We will win this war. We are determined to win this war. And that's what I came across, this steely-eyed determination, not enthusiasm for the war. There's very few people, in fact, I didn't meet anybody who said, hell yeah, we're at war. Let's go, baby. Let's hook and jab and let's kill. There wasn't this artificiality of, USA, USA. There were people who were saying, we want this war to end. We hate this war. We hate what this war is doing. This is not who we are as a people. But you've compelled us to do this, so this war will end on our terms, and there will be no compromise. And that's the other thing I got from there. Anybody who's hoping that the Russian people can somehow be divided on this issue and compelled to take a softer stance, no, there's no more leverage. They don't care about the West. It's not that they hate the West, but they don't care about it. We've become irrelevant because we've made ourselves irrelevant through economic sanctions that have backfired. Russia has emerged with a growing economy. And in doing so, if you take a look, Russia just published a new foreign policy last year that defines Russia. And Russia has emerged from the self-doubt that existed after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the decade of the 90s, where many Russians sought to define themselves, through Western bias, Western lenses, forgot who they were, lost touch with what meant to be a Russian. Well, Russia's rediscovered this. They've fallen in love with themselves again. That's my impression. And the Russians are proud of who they are. They're proud of what they've accomplished. And they've said that never again will we allow the West to be able to leverage itself politically and economically, is what happened in the catastrophe of the 1990s. And so the Russians are a very proud people. They're not an arrogant people, though. They're very humble people, but they're proud of who they are. They're proud of their culture. They're proud of their religion. They're proud of their history, their nation, but they're at war. And so the second part of my trip to Russia was to learn more about this aspect of it. I'm writing an article right now, and I call it, Russia's Gauntlet of Redemption. And, people say, well, why redemption, Scott? Why would you use that word? Well, Vladimir Putin himself has admitted that he was naive about 2014. And when I did have the opportunity to travel through the new territories. I in addition to Chechnya, and I'll discuss that in a second, I went to Crimea, and then I went on to Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk. That is the gauntlet of redemption, starting with Crimea, or starting with Chechnya, through Crimea, up through. I met a lady in Lugansk who, was talking about, the pride she felt as being part of Russia. But then she got teary-eyed and she said, but as much as I love the Russians, as much as I appreciate Vladimir Putin for what he's doing here and what the Russians are doing to make us part of Russia, why did you have to wait 8 years? Why did we have to suffer? Because they did suffer. The world has forgotten that. For 8 years, the people of Lugansk and Donetsk, the people of the Donbass, suffered under a brutal Ukrainian oppression. Brutal. Where the Ukrainian government stopped treating them as human beings and called them terrorists. It was an anti-terrorist operation that they launched that justified firing on civilian targets, killing women and children and men who were not combatants. For 8 long years, these people suffered. So yeah, they're very happy about Russia and what Russia's doing right now, and they love being part of Russia. But there's a bitterness there. There's this bitterness. And so this is why I call it the gauntlet of redemption. And the reason why I start in Chechnya is when you think, because a lot of people say, well, how does Russia repair relations with Ukraine? How does that ever happen? It will never happen now. Too much has happened. Too much blood has been spilled. Too many words have been spoken in anger. Oh my God, let's go back 20 years, ladies and gentlemen, to Chechnya. And let's talk about blood being spilled, words in anger, cultures that are incompatible, Orthodox Russia with the Islamic Chechens, Grozny was a flattened city. It looked like Stalingrad. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Chechens had lost their lives. And it's a small country. And the Chechens were starting to consume themselves because they have this blood feud thing. If a Chechen kills a Chechen, that family has to redeem it with the blood of the Chechen who killed the Chechen who kills the Chechen. It never ends. And it was just going this way. And Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, who said, he's not backing down. I mean, the first trip he made as president after he was sworn in was to get into a helicopter and fly to the front lines to talk to Russian soldiers fighting the Chechens in the Chechen-Russian conflict. So he's not a pacifist, but he's a realist, and he realized that the path they were on was not going to succeed. Everybody was going to fail. And fortunately for him, he had a counterpart in Chechnya, Akhmat Kadyrov, the father of the current head of the Chechen Republic, Ramzan Kadyrov. Akhmat Kadyrov was the Grand Mufti of the Chechen Republic. He's the lead religious dude. He's the head Muslim, and he helped get Chechen independence, the Ichkeria Republic in the 1990s. He fought for that. He didn't approach this saying, I'm pro-Russia, but he's a man who sat there and said, what's happening here? Because we are a Sunni nation that practices this mysticist Sufism. We're a peaceful people inherently. I mean, if we want to fight, we'll fight, but we don't want this. And we're eating ourselves, family against family, clan against clan. And it's being promoted by outside interests who are bringing in this foreign Islamic fanaticism, Wahhabism, Salafism. That's not who we are. And yet we have people buying into this because of the hatred that's been consuming us because of this conflict with Russia. We need to end this conflict. And Putin and he were in agreement. They need to end this conflict. So they got together. And I call it the Chechen Miracle. The Chechen Miracle. These people, Sarah, I was in, villages in Chechnya that during the 1990s had been the scene where hundreds of Russian soldiers were killed, thousands of Chechen civilians and fighters were killed. The blood defines the soil. The blood defines the building. There's blood everywhere because of the fighting. And yet they brought me there, and these are villages that have rebuilt themselves. The people live in peace and prosperity. If a Russian or a foreigner comes in, they're treated as guests with respect. There's no hatred there. Why? Because the Chechens and the Russians have learned how to live in peace by mutually respecting one another. Chechnya is a very different republic than any other republic in the Russian Federation. It's, of course, an Islamic republic, and Islam is a very important part of the being, of the Chechen being. They have their own language, their own culture, their own history, their own values, but they define themselves as Russian, and this became apparent. I had an extraordinarily interesting engagement with Ramzan Kadyrov. I was invited to have lunch with him. My host, Alexander Ziryanov, arranged it. He has what I call the magic phone. Basically, when he makes a phone call, things happen. And there was an interest in Ramzan Kadyrov and me getting together that dates back to May. It didn't happen in May, but it happened here. And so I was brought into the presidential area, the head of the Chechen Republic Palace area. As we get out of the car, walking up to the building where we're going to have lunch, I see this individual in the distance there by the entranceway, and there's this giant white wolf. And the wolf is being held by two Chechen soldiers, keeping up and going face to face with this man who's feeding it and then petting it. And down as we come closer, it's Ramzan Kadyrov. Feeding his white wolf. And I was just concerned that I was lunch. When he said, I'm inviting you for lunch, I was getting through my mind, who's lunch? Am I the meal? But it was just, that's who he is. He's a larger than life figure. He is, the son of his father. He understands the legacy that he inherited, and he is determined that Chechnya will be a Chechen republic defined by Chechen values, but it's part of the Russian Federation. And so when we had lunch, and we had a wide-ranging conversation during lunch about a variety of issues, we talked about the Ukrainian conflict, and we talked about the absolute loyalty that Chechnya has to the Russian Federation, and that he has to Vladimir Putin personally. You saw this if you go to the Akhmat Kadyrov Museum anywhere in Grozny, anywhere in Chechnya. It's Vladimir Putin's picture and Akhmat Kadyrov's picture. And all the Chechens understand that there wouldn't have been peace. They wouldn't have this prosperity they enjoy today if those two men hadn't sat down and buried the hatchet and found a pathway to peace that has created this Chechen miracle. The Grozny was flattened. As you drive into Grozny today, if you come in around sundown, you think you're driving into Las Vegas because of the lights, the big buildings. They're all lit up. It's a beautiful city, a stunning city. Built from the ground up. Giant mosques, but also Orthodox churches. For every mosque built in Grozny, an Orthodox church goes up because of the respect that they show to each other. So we have this discussion, but then Kadyrov gets this twinkle in his eye and he goes, hey, want to talk to the troops? And I'm like, flashback to May, where I had been diverted from what I thought was going to be a nice little sojourn in the mountains of Chechnya, enjoying shashlik roasted over an open fire, enjoying fresh mountain air. And suddenly they diverted us to the presidential barracks where the presidential guard is. And they had 2,000 heavily armed Chechens there. And I inspected them and met them and all this. It was a show of respect. And then they put on a demonstration for me. And it was military professionals respecting military professionals. So I'm like, sure, why not? And so we leave out the back entrance and the door opens up and I'm sitting there going, something's not right here. As soon as you open the door, there are a lot of soldiers there.
That was a big crowd.
Full combat gear, fully armed. I'm looking at the machine guns going, that's live ammunition.
Yeah.
In America, you can't get near the President of the United States if you're a soldier with live ammunition. The Secret Service goes around and takes it all away because we don't trust our people not to do something stupid. I'm seeing everybody's there. There's grenades, RPGs, rifles, pistols, everything with live ammo. There's a lot of these guys, but you don't know how many until you make the turn, because then the peasant grounds open up into the rolling hills, and the hills are covered with soldiers. And I'm like, holy cow, what the hell has happened here? And they part like Moses parting the Red Sea as we walk through them. And we get up to the main presidential building where a microphone was there. And Kadyrov turns around and he's addressing him. And it is literally a sea of soldiers, 25,000 strong. The Grozny garrison, which had been assembled while we were at lunch. And when I say assembled, Sarah, they marched through the city streets. They were told, mobilize. These guys come out of their houses. Apparently they have all their kit at home, and they come out of their houses or barracks and they literally march through the city streets, assembling around Kadyrov's palace, waiting for him to address them. And I'm like, cool. So he talks about the Ukraine conflict, about the role, and the takeaway here is that these were 25,000 soldiers who are loyal to Russia. Imagine that 25 years ago. You couldn't imagine assembling 25,000 Chechen warriors and they would be loyal to Russia. Now, the scary part was when he finished speaking, he turned to me and he said, now it's your turn to speak. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. And because I don't speak Russian that well. And Alexander Zuryanov's fiance, Olga, who speaks good English, they said, don't worry, she'll translate for you. So as we're walking up to the microphone, she's sitting there, I hear her words. Please keep your sentences very short and simple because I'm not confident. But I looked at her eyes and her eyes were saying, don't make me do this. Don't make me do this. Don't make me do this. Pleading to me. So I basically went, screw it. I got this. Go large or go home. I strode up to that microphone and I delivered a speech in Russian, the worst Russian language in the history of Russian languages, but I delivered it with the confidence that one only has by being a Marine and fearing nothing. And and we did that. So it was a very surreal experience. But again, the takeaway isn't that I delivered a very bad speech in poor Russian to 25,000 Chechen soldiers. The takeaway is that 25,000 Chechen soldiers were assembled at the orders of their leader, and these soldiers were 100% loyal to Russia. These are soldiers that have fought and bled on the battlefield in Ukraine, who would return to the battlefield in Ukraine to fight on behalf of Russia. And so I call this the foundational aspect of the gauntlet of redemption. You start with Chechnya. Why? Because the road of redemption has to begin with a clear example of why you have hope. The Chechen miracle is the hope for the future of the new territories. A nation that was built from the rubble of war by Russia working responsibly with a sovereign people, with an independent people, and creating this tie that allows 25,000 soldiers to be assembled that quick who are loyal to death to the Russian cause. So we go from you. If you have a question about Chechnya, go ahead.
I have to ask, since you were in Chechnya, did anybody talk about? I'm really glad that we're highlighting the very strong relationship between Russia and its Muslim or one of its Muslim autonomous locations, because I don't think that people are giving Russia enough credit in regards to Gaza, Israel. I mean, they've dropped thousands of tons of aid, and even their recent language directed towards Israel has been very like pro Palestine. So I was wondering if anybody in Gaza, because I know that Ramzan Kadyrov was very vocal in the beginning. Did you guys talk about Gaza at all, or the Muslim world?
Absolutely. I had two very distinctive conversations. One with Ramzan Kadyrov about what his posture was, and then how he believed that Chechnya as a Muslim entity could play a role in facility, because you saw, the Chechens played a role in Syria. The Chechens sent military police battalions over there, and because they are Muslim, they're able to interface with a Muslim population to a degree that's not available to, say, Christians. It's just Muslims identify with Muslims, Christians identify with Christians. It's not that the Syrians are hostile to non-Muslim Russians. It's just that the Chechens bring this presence. And I said, can you do that? And he said, well, this is what we want to do, not necessarily with troops. This is a different thing, but because of our status as a Muslim entity and the respect that the world holds to the Chechens and our faith, our adherence to the faith. But the more relevant conversation, I guess, was with the Grand Mufti of the Shali Mosque. The Shali Mosque is, of course, this giant mosque built outside of Grozny, and it is a mosque that's dedicated to the spirit and the legacy of Ahmad Kadyrov, the Ramzan's father. It's a mosque that defines the Muslim faith in Chechnya. It's a Sunni-based faith. They adhere to Sufism, sort of a mystical approach. It's a very peaceful approach. And because of the credibility that the Chechens have in fighting in defense of their faith, foreign delegations come in and visit the mosque, and there's a lot of interconnectivity between the Chechen Mufti and the Chechen religious figures and the rest of the Muslim world. So the Chechens are playing a big indirect approach in terms of influencing the Islamic world's approach towards resolving this conflict. Traditionally, the Saudis have been a big player in that region. Other nations, Egypt, Syria, etc. But almost everybody's lost credibility in this regard. And so the Saudis have sort of forfeited the leading role that they used to play as religious authorities. A key aspect of what's going on in Gaza is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third most holiest shrine in Islam. The Hamas nicknamed their operation Al-Aqsa Flood. It's all about redeeming Al-Aqsa in the eyes of the Muslim world because of the deprivations of Israel and what Israel intends to do to bring it down, to destroy it. And so the Chechens have now emerged as a credible voice in the Islamic world, articulating on behalf of the Palestinian people. It's done behind the scenes. It's not something that they put out there up front, but the Chechens are playing a very big role, and they're very much engaged in this problem. They're very much engaged in this in the crisis. It's just not, they don't need headlines. They need results.
I think that's a lot of the problem, is that Russia and Chechnya do not need headlines. Like, people were kind of like, what has Russia even done? And I'm like, they just dropped another couple tons of aid. Like, what, they don't, but they don't talk about it. They don't.
Yeah, there's no press conference where they go, and today we proved we're the best people in the world because we did X, Y, and Z.
There's no photo ops. There's no Putin standing in front of aid.
That's one of the problems with Russians, and they'll admit it.
Yeah,
They're not very good
that
at
is
this
the
information
problem.
war thing. They're not very good. They do things that could be, they could be sold better, they could sell themselves better, but that's not who they are. They're not
No,
narcissists. They're not sitting here saying, me, me, me. They're saying, there's a problem. How can we help you? Let us do this. And then when it's done, they move on to the next problem. They're not about saying, all the attention's on me. If America dropped a couple hundred tons of aid, we'd have documentaries filmed about it. We'd have the news talking about it. We'd have isolated stories about the hero American humanitarian worker who brought aid to this, and it would all be about America's efforts. It would never be about the people on the ground, the people who are suffering. So I think Russia, maybe they're doing the right thing. Maybe they're not falling into the American narcissistic trap. We keep saying that they should do more, but Russia's not doing too bad. I mean, they're leading by example, which is usually the best way to lead. So we can be critical of Russia for not selling themselves as strongly as maybe they could, but on the other hand, maybe that's the best approach because they don't lose sight of what it's really all about.
well, they must not be doing that bad if they're still able to pass through Bab el-Mandeb and the Red Sea
You're
unharmed.
just making fun of me, aren't you? You're mocking me and my inability to say that word.
Bab el-Mandeb, the
Yeah.
gates of lamentation. I do want to talk about the ICJ ruling that came out today, kind of right on the heels of the ICJ ruling regarding Israel. We come out with we knew that they were going to do a ruling based on Russia, Ukraine, which kind of came out as like a slap on the wrist and was pointless. Did you read anything about that today?
No, unfortunately, I haven't.
Basically, they found them Russia guilty of whatever, but then said Ukraine cannot get any money out of it. So it's just like, sorry. And
So
then
all the people that thought that they'd be able to use the ICJ ruling as a vehicle to justify the theft of Russian assets won't be able to do so.
exactly, that's what it was. They can't justify the theft of Russian assets, and Ukraine will not be getting any money out of that ruling. And I think that it spells out. It's not. I hate to say it this way, but it just shows what a farce the ICJ really is. Even last week, they did the ruling on Israel, and today the Americans said, "Hey, guys, you need to reread the ruling because it did not call for a ceasefire. It didn't call for an immediate ceasefire.
Didn't use that word, but it said
Right.
everything but ceasefire.
Right. So that's why it was worded that way. So now we know. Like, and speaking of what's going on in Gaza, did you see the recent video of IDF soldiers going into a hospital dressed up as Arabs?
Yeah, I mean I hope one day we're able to identify every single one of these. They were the equivalent of the Israelis, of the U.S. Navy SEALs. It was the Israeli equivalent of it. I think people need to refamiliarize themselves with international humanitarian law and the Geneva Accords and such. Hospitals are protected areas, and even if an enemy combatant is in a hospital receiving treatment, they're not exposed to any attacks. They're protected. And so you can't attack a hospital. You can't go in and target. This was murder, but this was a war crime, and it's caught live on TV. And nobody's saying anything. I don't understand how the United States and Europe can be silent in the face of this wanton disregard for international law. Um, it's one thing. I mean, I could understand the Israelis saying, we don't like those 3 guys that are there. Good. Then go in with an arrest warrant, bring in police and seek to detain them, take control of the hospital, a room that they're in while they're recovering. And then when a doctor certifies that they have been recovered, place them under arrest and detain them. Do something like that. But to come in and just murder them, straight up murder, is a violation of international humanitarian law. It's a war crime. Every single one of those Israeli sailors is a criminal. And I hope one day that their names are known. And then we do things. If Russia did that, I mean, right now, if the Russians burst into a hospital in Kharkov, dressed up as doctors and Ukrainians and all this stuff, went in and blasted the brains out of 3 Azov Nazis, we'd be condemning that to high hell. We'd be saying no, and we'd be demanding sanctions, demanding everything. We'd be screaming about the criminal nature of Russia. Israel gets a free pass. I mean, they've been getting a free pass. They've been allowed to commit, genocide against the Palestinian people for, hundreds of days now. So why does it surprise me? And it doesn't surprise me that they get a pass on this one as well. But this was so flagrant, so in your
we
face.
actually have a video of it. So let's
Yeah.
show the video so our listeners can see. I think.
I mean, I'm impressed with the Michael Kors bag that the one dude was wearing. So, that's a joke, but
it's sick. It's really sick. And the celebratory tweets that came after it were, we went in, we did it with precision. We killed the 3 guys we wanted to kill. If somebody, one of the large Zionist accounts said something like, if Hamas would have came into the hospital, they would have killed everyone. And so this is.
Well, we don't know that because Hamas didn't go into a hospital,
Exactly.
and it doesn't matter. I mean, if I rob a bank, I could be arrested as a bank robber. Yeah, because you are a bank robber. And if I rob a bank, it doesn't justify you robbing a bank. Breaking the law is breaking the law. So it's an absurd argument. It shows how weak these people are morally, intellectually, and to be honest, physically. Guys, this isn't heroic what they did. This is murder, straight up murder. There's no hero there. None of those Israeli soldiers are heroes. They murdered men in hospital beds, men who are helpless. Helpless. My God, at least throw a pistol on the bed and give them a chance. Like a spaghetti Western. Clint Eastwood would have at least, thrown a pistol down, or Dirty Harry, pick up the pistol, give yourself a chance, be a man. No, these were cowards, straight up cowards, and they should be condemned as such for the rest of their lives, as should their unit. We should never again praise Israeli special forces because they exposed themselves here. We now know who they are. Mass murderers. These aren't good people. These aren't special operations people. These are criminals. These are thugs. These are cowards. I'm disgusted by them.
Yeah, when I saw it, and just the fact that, we've been seeing a lot of disgusting things out of the IOF, and this one was just like, this is really icing on the cake because this is in the West Bank. This isn't even in Gaza. One of the guys was in a coma. They killed him in the hospital bed. The other 2 were killed while they were recovering from wounds in other places. But it's really a testament to what Israel's really about, what this is really about. On the heel, coming off of the ICJ ruling, they are celebrating going into a hospital disguised and killing people, terrorizing the medical staff that works in there after they've already destroyed multiple hospitals in the Gaza Strip. You have to laugh to keep from crying, but it's really, really horrible. And now we might be going to war with Iran over it. Why don't we show the clip of Biden? I don't think he knows where he's going, but Ari, if you have the.
Yes. I do hold them responsible in the sense that they're supplying the weapons to the people who did it. We'll have that discussion. We'll see. I don't think we need a wider war in the Middle East. That's not what I'm looking for.
Just a nice big good soundbite of just a bunch of hypocrisy. Iran is responsible for the deaths of the soldiers that actually died in Syria, that we're lying and say died in Jordan, because we don't want to say that they died on our illegal bases in Syria. Iran is responsible for soldiers dying on our illegal bases in Syria. because they supplied the weapons. We have no proof of this, but what we do know is that a 76 was just shot down with an American Patriot in the Russian airspace. So we're going to war with Iran for what? And what about military capabilities of Iran? What kind of quagmire could we be getting ourselves involved in?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that Iran has been preparing for a war with the United States for the past 30 years. We have not been preparing for a war with Iran for the past 30 years. In fact, for the most of the, since 2001, we were fighting for 20 years. We were fighting low intensity conflict in Afghanistan and in Iraq, a completely different kind of war than the one that we would have to face fighting a nation like Iran. Iran has extraordinarily advanced capabilities. To give you an example, we had a drone. I don't know the exact designation of it, but the nickname was Beast of Kandahar, this giant B-2 looking stealth drone that was used, for instance, in support of the SEAL raid on Abbottabad that killed bin Laden. The image of Obama and his cohorts staring at a TV screen, looking at the drone feed. That drone feed was the Beast of Kandahar. And we were using the Beast of Kandahar to go into Iran and scout out Western Iran in sites there. The Iranians parked an intelligence team off of the Kandahar airfield and just collected data. They collected the communications, because as the Beast of Kandahar takes off, it's communicating with the ground team that's doing that. So they're collecting that data. They're learning how to fly the Beast of Kandahar. And then when the Beast of Kandahar gets to a certain altitude, it transitions to control through satellite to an American team in somewhere, I think in Nevada, who's controlling it.
Yeah.
And then it comes back and they pass it off and then they land it. And this is all encrypted. It's all, it's not in the open. It's encrypted. It's all secret, hush, hush, boom, boom. And the Iranians collected it, broke the code, and then took the Beast of Kandahar off, and we're supposed to transition over to the satellite. The Iranians went, time out, we got this. And they took it over. And then they landed it in Western Iran. And they took it. Now we were like, oh, they can't do it. They're just a bunch of ragheads. There's a bunch of Persian idiots. They're flip-flop wearing morons, camel jockeys. They never would be able to do something like that. Clearly, we had a technological issue, and the plane just landed on its own in Western Iraq or Iran. Nope. The Iranians kicked our butts because they're pretty damn smart. Iran has an entire generation of geeks who have grown up
geeks,
and they play computer games. And they're just as geeky as our guys are, but they're focused. They go to Math Olympics and they win. They place high. Their challengers come from places like China. We send teams from, Caltech and from MTI or from MIT, and they place lower down. So the best and the brightest in America, who are primarily Asian anyways, can't compete with the Persians and the Chinese, who are pretty damn bright. So we need to understand that these guys not only know how we fight, they've been watching us. They know everything about how we do. They know how we communicate. They know how we operate. They've been studying us, and they've come up with solutions to that problem. They have built what we can't build, a hypersonic missile. They have fielded it. It's ready to operate. We can't shoot it down. And they've shown the precision of their guidance systems today. This isn't back in this Gulf War where you fire off a Scud and you have no idea where it's going to land. Today, when they launch a missile, they know exactly where it's to land within 3 feet. They know exactly where it's going to hit. And it's going to hit there. And if it's a hypersonic missile, we can't shoot it down. And we know that they can do this now. We don't admit it in public. But the fact is, if we went to war against Iran, all the military installations in the Middle East would be destroyed with heavy casualties. This includes the Al Ubaid Air Base in Qatar, where we fly all our airplanes out, where our command and control center is, gone. The Bahrain, the Fifth Fleet, gone. Kuwait, gone. Saudi Arabia, gone. Iraq, Syria, gone. There won't be anything left standing, and there's nothing we can do to stop Iran from doing this if they want to do it. So Iran has put us on notice. Now, Biden's, I mean, it just shows the absolute depravity of American policy in the Middle East. First of all, there's no reason for American troops to be in Syria.
No.
Understand that. The anti-ISIS mission is over. The Islamic State mission's over. We're really there just to generate internal domestic unrest targeting Bashar al-Assad by taking tribes that used to be pro-ISIS and now equipping them and arming them so they go out and commit atrocities against Syrian forces. That's what we do. It's a terrorist operation run by the United States on Syrian soil. But even then, we've sort of stopped doing that because it just doesn't make any sense anymore. So we have people sitting there doing nothing. And we've turned them into sitting ducks because of our policy in support of Israel. Now, I believe in deterrence. I'm a big believer in deterrence. I don't like war. I don't want war. But I do believe that if there's something in our legitimate national security interests, that we will do it we'll try to be as responsible as possible. But I will tell people that this is very important to us. And we're doing it in a way that doesn't threaten your existential survival. And I have to warn you that if you use violence against us to prevent us from doing this, we will respond with immediate, overwhelming force. We will make your life a living hell. We will devastate you. The damage done to you will be so disproportionate that you don't even want to think about opposing us. That's called deterrence. The problem is, all those words I said, we can't back up. And so we keep talking about deterrence. Remember when the Dwight D. Eisenhower carrier battle group came in, when the Gerald Ford was diverted back into the Mediterranean, it was all to deter people, as if a carrier battle group is going to scare the crap out of people who've been bombed by American airplanes, dropping American bombs for decades to no effect. Deterrence doesn't work. And especially doesn't work when they do what you told them they can't do, and you don't do anything meaningful in response. Bam, they hit an American base. Bam, we bomb a little base in Iraq. And they're going, well, that didn't hurt. Bam, we hit another American. Bam, they did that. There's no deterrence there. So no, Biden's in a situation now where he's been humiliated because American troops have died. A large number were wounded. How does
he was humiliated prior to that. They asked him, is the goal, are you achieving your goals in Yemen? And he kind of said goals as in making them stop doing what they were doing. Then no, like he already knew. And so
deterrence doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work here. They don't understand this enemy. That's a big issue with America.
And all we do is we weaken ourselves. We discredit ourselves when we say we're going to project deterrence and then we don't follow through, or we can't follow through. This is the reality. We can't deter any of these militias from doing what they do. But bottom line is, at some point in time, I mean, Biden has said himself out, he can't go to war against Iran. And I don't believe we're going to go to war against Iran because everything I just said is known by the Pentagon. And how do we know it's known? Well, for instance, when Donald Trump was president, the Iranians shot down a Global Hawk drone over the Strait of Hormuz. And Trump wanted to bomb Iran, wanted to bomb the air defense site. And the Pentagon went, yeah, we can do that. But if we do that, then we unleash a escalation that will lead to devastation, and we don't have the ability to prevail. We will lose. Now, we'll have to mobilize, Mr. President, and it will take months, if not years, to get the military force assembled capable of holding Iran accountable. But even then, there's no guarantee that we will win, that we could start a conflict with Iran, and there's a good possibility we will lose. And losing means sunken ships. General Berger, the former commandant of the Marine Corps, talked about it when he became commandant. He said, we are married to legacy approaches of amphibious warfare, where we put all our Marines on a handful of ships, and we believe we can line up off the coast and launch the landing force and land, shore, and aircraft carrier air support. He said none of that's going to work now because they all have missiles that will sink that ship before it gets anywhere near the shore. We can't do this anymore. And that's the reality. We can't win a war against Iran. We don't have enough military force in the region, and we don't have the ability today to assemble that military force because we have competing military obligations in Europe, where we have 100,000 troops, and we're preparing for this new exercise where we're going to pretend that we're fighting the Russians. And then we have the Chinese problem, where we're trying to build up a military force or capability in the Pacific capable of deterring the Chinese. We've lost all deterrent capability. We scare nobody anymore because the world has learned the lesson that the Houthi have taught everybody, that when you stand up to America, there's nothing America can do to prevent you from doing what you want to do. This is a bad place for America to be because we've been exposed as basically a paper tiger.
Exactly.
We're able
to get exposed by Russia. It's a whole nother ball game where they get exposed by Ansarallah. Like
Yeah.
and I do have to ask you the hypothetical because I did ask Andrei Martyanov and I really loved his answer. So I'll ask you and we'll see if we like your answer too. So hypothetically speaking, if the war did break out, where does Russia fall? I know that their involvement will probably be minimal, but in terms of like foreign policy, I see them as more staunchly allied to Iran than to the Russian-speaking Israelis. And I don't know if you get that same kind of vibe.
First of all, Russia's not aligned with Israel. There's a connectivity there because of the number of Russian Jews or people claiming to be Russian Jews who have gone to Israel. But there's no they have a relationship, and Russia's been able to influence Israel, and Israel's been able to influence Russia. But right now, the Russian government doesn't see eye to eye with the Netanyahu government or with the Israeli government. They're actually opposed to almost everything the Israelis are doing. Meanwhile, Iran has aligned itself as a critical ally who has stepped up when it was not easy to step up and provide Russia with assistance when they needed it most, when Russia was desperate to come up with a solution to deep strike capabilities in Ukraine. While they were, they found that the initial approach wasn't able to totally defeat Ukrainian air defense. It was a very expensive approach. They hadn't geared up their defense industry to the point where they were producing enough strike weapons to sustain an air campaign. And it was becoming problematic. The Iranians provided the solution, the Shahed drone. And the combination of the Shahed drone, the tactics, enabled Russia to suppress Ukraine's air defense network, bring it down, do strategic strikes that have inflicted tremendous amount of harm on Ukraine. And this is with the help of Iran. And Russia is also looking to Iran for other help in the region. Iranian diplomacy can help in the Azerbaijani-Armenian conflict. Iran can put pressure on Turkey. Iran can do a number of things. Iran is a player in Central Asia and developing it, and it's better to have the Iranians working with you than against you in that. And Russia just signed a military. It's not an alliance, but it's a document that says that the Russian military and the Iranian military are united together in joint security, meaning that they have common security interests. So I believe that Russia would they're not going to deploy Russian military forces to Iran. Iran doesn't need it, but what Russia will do is ensure that Iran has adequate diplomatic backup, economic backup, that Russia will use its influence in Brics and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and other regional entities to ensure that Iran is backed up diplomatic. And then Russia will provide Iran with the resources it needs to defend itself. So you would probably see certain weapon systems appear in the Iranian inventory that might not otherwise have been there. But Russia will not abandon Iran. Russia will not allow the United States to defeat Iran. And this is another reality that the Biden administration has to deal with, because Russia has made Iran all but unbeatable.
You mentioned BRICS. So now today we finally got the news that Saudi Arabia is now in BRICS. They are officially in BRICS. Does this have any effect on the normalization of relations with Israel and Saudi? Does it change anything in regards to the trajectory of this war? Or do you think Saudi just looks at BRICS as strictly economic bloc, not dictating this conflict at all?
Well, BRICS is an economic forum, but it has very critical geopolitical heft to it now. Saudi Arabia joining BRICS is a good thing. First of all, it puts Saudi Arabia and Iran in the same forum. So anybody who's seeking to create a breach between Saudi Arabia and Iran, I think they're barking up the wrong tree right there. It also means that any Iranian response to an American attack might hold off on taking out Saudi Arabian oil facilities, etc. So it's a good thing. Russia has taken a approach. Russia's not the United States. You see, the American look is it's a zero-sum game, that if Saudi Arabia joins BRICS, then it can't have relations with Israel. That's not how Russia operates. That's not how BRICS operates. Saudi Arabia is a sovereign state, and Saudi Arabia will do that which Saudi Arabia needs to do to, protect its interests. And therefore, if Saudi Arabia is a member of BRICS, it doesn't preclude Saudi Arabia also normalizing relations with Israel. And I don't think Russia would ever tell the Saudis you can't normalize relations with Israel. That's Saudi Arabia's business. But what the Russians would say is, as a member of BRICS, you can't allow Israel to use you to sabotage BRICS. We can't allow you to become the poison pill in BRICS. And so it complicates the diplomacy, but I think Saudi Arabia is fully capable of having good relations with the United States, good relations with Israel, if that's the route they choose to go, and to be a solid member of BRICS. And this is what multipolarity is all about. Multipolarity isn't about recreating a bipolar world where it's us versus them. Multipolarity is about everybody gets to do what they want to do. You have to do it in a manner that people are attracted to you, that people want to work with you. You can't alienate everybody, but there's nothing wrong with Saudi Arabia pursuing an independent foreign policy that allows them to be responsible members of BRICS and pursue sound relations with the United States and Israel if they choose to go that route.
So a question from our audience, a few questions from our audience. The escalation in Iran will inevitably aggravate the economic situation in the US and EU. What do you think is the end goal here?
Well, look, the one lesson of the ongoing conflict with the Houthi is that by shutting down the Bab el-Mandeb straight to pro-Israeli or Western traffic, there's been horrific economic cost for Israel and for the West, for Europe. The other thing is that there's nothing the United States can do to stop the Houthi from achieving this objective. We ran an operation, I think, about a week ago, where it was a designed military operation where we took American naval vessels to build a screen, an air defense screen, to shield 2 American flag cargo ships that were going to run the gauntlet and hide behind this screen and make their way through and get to the port of Elayat and screw the Houthi. We win. And they started, they're running, and the Houthi start firing, and we're shooting down some. One missile gets ahead, lands 100 meters off the bow of the ship, and they go, turn around, we're done. We lost that battle. We didn't achieve our military objective. We wanted to get those 2 ships through. They did. Not only did they turn around, but then their shipping carriers said, we're never doing that again. And then insurance providers said, and if you do, you get no insurance because we're never going to allow you to do that again. So the military operation designed to ensure freedom of navigation failed. It actually further restricted freedom of navigation. Now, I bring this up to point out that the United States Navy has claimed for some time now that they guarantee that the Strait of Hormuz will be opened, that Iran cannot shut the Strait of Hormuz. They guaranteed it. Those words are meaningless today. The U.S. can't guarantee anything. And if they shut down the Strait of Hormuz, they strangle the global economy, strangle it, especially Europe. And we know this. We know this. We know we can't open it. So this is another reason why I think that we're not going to do anything precipitous against Iran. Joe Biden can wear sunglasses and look like, Tom Cruise at the age of 96, staring people down, but nobody's buying that act. If the United States was as tough as he claims, we would have already struck. The fact that it's taken us this long means we don't know what to do. We're scared. We have no viable. And look at Kirby. I don't normally feel sorry for pathological liars, but to look at Kirby up there trying to answer, the face just says it all. He can't tell the truth but he can't even defend it. His lies are so outrageous that he knows he's lying. He knows that we know that he's lying. It's just pathetic. The Biden administration has humiliated the United States of America, has humiliated us through its weakness, through the fact that we don't have a moral foundation. I mean, why are we letting Israel get away with this genocide? Hell, we're signatories to the Genocide Convention, and we're letting Israel commit genocide, commit murder without question. Just do it. We stand for nothing as a nation anymore. Nothing. And the world is seeing this. The harm that's being done to the United States right now on the international stage is irreparable. It's not just about Russia, China. It's about the global South. It's about the developing world, who we thought we could compete with to get their loyalty with Russia and China. Days over of competing. They know who the bad guy is. We're the baddies. And the whole world knows it now. And we're not doing anything to try and alter that. This war could end. This conflict in Gaza could end right now with one phone call.
100%. And instead of doing that, we are not funding the UNRWA. That's what we've done in response to the ICJ ruling. Instead of saying, oh, you know what, maybe we shouldn't fund the genocide, we'll just not fund UNRWA. Also, we'll go and ask China to help us get through the Red Sea. You could just not do a genocide, and then you'd be able to go anywhere you want in the world. That would be great. That's what, I mean, basically China is setting an example for you. Don't do a genocide, and then you can put your ships wherever you want all over the world. I have to ask from our audience and for myself now, but have you gotten any blowback from your trip from the 3-letter agencies? And I saw on Twitter that you are seeking asylum and possibly defecting to Russia.
Yeah. I mean, it's in some ways it's funny because it's so absurd. The irony there is, whoever wrote that doesn't know a damn thing about me. And they picked me at a moment in my press conference where someone had asked me the question, would I consider moving to Russia and settling in Russia because I'm so well received in Russia? And my answer was, hell no. I'm an American. I was born in America. I'm going to die in America. I love my country. My goal in reaching out the hand of friendship to Russia isn't to defect to Russia. It's to ensure that my country, my fellow citizens can live in peace and harmony going forward by being friends with Russia. That I think promoting friendship with Russia is a hell of a lot better in the interest of the United States than promoting conflict with Russia. And so I am committed to this. I just happen to like Russia too. I like the Russian people. I appreciate their history and their culture. So I enjoy going to Russia. It's not like this is a chore. I mean, it's hard work. Trust me, it was exhausting work, but it was enjoyable because I have a passion for Russia. I have a passion for the Russian people, for their history, for their culture. There's so much more I want to learn about Russia, but I'm an American. Everything I do is for America. People said, are you, so you're for Russia? I said, no, I'm not for Russia. I'm for America. I'm for doing that which makes things better for America. I just happen to believe that being friends with Russia is the best thing we can do for America. But the idea that I would run away from a fight, I just remind people again, I actually read the Constitution. I took an oath to the Constitution, and I know that, it's we the people of the United States of America. It's my damn document. The government doesn't own it. We make the government. The government works for me. The government is responsive to me. And it's my duty as an American patriot to stand up and oppose bad policy by my government. People are like, well, you're anti-American because you're not supporting, the sanctions against Russia. Sanctions against Russia are stupid and they're hurting America. So why am I anti-American when I say what we're doing is stupid? It's wrong and it's hurting us. That doesn't make me anti-American. It makes me pro-American.
Exactly. The American government is anti-America. They've destroyed the global South. They've destroyed Europe. They've destroyed Africa. They've made a rivalry with China and Russia. So you going to Russia, and especially Chechnya that was the move. I was like, I'm so glad he went to Chechnya because Chechnya does not get enough credit or enough recognition for the things because that is something that's brought up all the time. You brought up Grozny and the Chechen War. That's something that the Muslims who do not want, or even Westerners who do not want the Arab world getting close to Russia, immediately bring up Grozny and the Chechen Wars. And we see now how those relationships have been completely mended.
Yeah.
And I would say that the Chechen Republic is probably the most loyal republic to the Russian Federation out of all of their republics. They are very closely aligned with Russia.
Well, they have they've put their blood where their mouth is, meaning that they're not just saying things; they're actually on the ground doing it. I had when I was in Chechnya, I had the opportunity to meet with a number of people besides Ramzan Kadyrov. Adam Delikanov. He's a Russian member of the Duma, but he was also the commander of the Chechen forces during the Battle of Mariupol. Fascinating evening with him talking about a variety of issues. But at the end, I talked to him about the Battle of Mariupol, and I asked him if he was going to write a book about it, and that it's it's important that this be captured because of the propaganda that's being told about the battle. And as we left, in the evening, I don't know what went through his mind, but apparently my curiosity got the better of him. And he said, "Oh, no, come here." And he took me into his private study and he pulled out the actual battle maps that he used during the battle, pulled them out and laid them on the table. So you've got all the annotations, the arrows, the force structure, the movement, the dates, the enemy order of battle. And he's showing me this, and he laid out several of them, and he's explained. And then he has his assistant bring the laptop, or sort of like an iPad type device, and he opens it up and he starts showing me it's classified Russian imagery of Mariupol at the time. So it's like a screenshot showing the disposition, and he's explaining the battle and the fighting and all this stuff. And I'm just sitting there going, "Is this real? Am I getting a personal brief from the Chechen forces about the Battle of Mariupol?" I mean, it was fascinating. Another guy that I got to meet was Opti Aladanov.
Oh, yeah. Everybody
Opti is the commander of, he's now been pulled off the battlefield. He's at the Russian General Staff Academy because he is a general officer. He's getting formal training, capturing his experiences. But Opti's, just a fascinating person to talk to. Then, of course, there's Lord Mahmoud Dudayev, who is Lord.
Yeah.
But you meet all these people, and you realize that the Chechens are a unique people. But the one thing they all have in common is, they're fanatically. When I say fanatically, I don't mean in the bad way, but they're Muslim. The Islamic faith defines who they are. They're all devout Muslims, and it's an inherent part of them. They all identify as Russian.
Yep.
They're Chechens, but they say, no, we're Russian. We wear the Russian flag. We fight for Russia. And they go to fight in Ukraine. And this is an important point, because they say, we see that which is happening in Ukraine is what the West tried to do with us. We know the threat that it poses. We know the price we paid. And so we need to nip this in the bud. And they are fanatical about that point. I didn't just go to Chechnya. I actually went to Crimea, and then on to Kherson, to Zaporizhia, to Donetsk, and Lugansk. Now, I have to tell you that the Russian government did not want me to make this trip. Not because they're anti-Scott Ritter. They actually, I think, rather like me. I don't know why, but they do. But they didn't want me to get killed. The bottom line, they didn't want anything bad to happen. And it's a war zone. It's not, war tourism is not encouraged. And I don't want to be a war tourist. But I also am somebody who is sensitive to the fact that, as an analyst, if I'm going to opine on a region, opine on a conflict, I need to get as much direct access to that region, to the people, to the conflict as possible. It makes my analysis more credible. So I needed to go there and see this firsthand. So we went to Crimea. Now, to get to Crimea, you have to cross the Crimea Bridge. It's a strategic target. It's been hit twice successfully, dropped spans. So I have to tell you, when I drive over the Crimea Bridge, I'm sitting there going, please, Ukraine, tonight's not a good night for us.
No storm shadows, please.
Just let little Scotty Ritter get over the damn bridge, please. And fortunately for me, they did. But even while you're in Crimea, we visited the home of a very close friend of my host, Alexander Zuryanov, a Crimean Tatar family, by the way, near the city of Feodosia. And they were just talking about, because Feodosia they launched a strike that blew up a Russian landing ship there recently, very dramatic explosion. And I said, "Did you guys see that?" I said, "Hell yeah, we saw that. We heard it. We felt it. It shook the buildings." And I said, "Well, was that scary?" He said, "Well, it was, but not as frightening as the air defense that's around us that launches every once in a while because you're middle of the night and all of a sudden you hear the Ukrainian drone, then and they're like, holy shit, what just happened there?" And then there's also nearby the Onyx coastal defense batteries, which the Russians also use to launch missile strikes against Ukraine in retaliation. So every once in a while, it's like, as the missiles go over their head, these guys live in a war zone. Now, I know there's people out there saying, I don't have any sympathy for the Russians because of what's happening to the Ukrainian people. All right, that's your business. But the reason why I bring this up is that Russia didn't bring this war on Ukraine. Ukraine brought this war on itself. And that becomes evident when you go to Crimea. I met with the governor of Crimea. We had a very long, detailed discussion, and he shared with me the circumstances of what happened in Crimea in February, March 2014, after the Maidan coup, and what the Ukrainians were trying to do in Crimea to bring this hate-filled Banderist ideology to Crimea, to intimidate the Russians, to terrorize the Russians, and to ensure that the Russian presence in Crimea would be, that the Russian people would be, forced to submit to the will of Banderist Kiev. And he said that it's like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, "You shall not pass." And he told us, but the bottom line is, Crimea is a Russian territory. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The people who live there identify as Russian. They are Russian. And you have to, even the Crimean Tatars, who have some historical grievances with Russia, with the Soviet Union over time, they say, no, it's Russia. We get it. Yeah, you can always go find out, no such thing as 100% homogeneity. So people are going to, well, I've heard from a Crimean Tatar who was forced to flee from Crimea and he's currently in Ukraine. I'm saying, okay, but what was the percentage of Crimean Tatars that fled? Less than 10%. The majority of them stayed in Crimea. They voted with their feet, and their feet stayed planted on Crimean soil because they wanted to be part of Russia. And they are part of Russia and the Crimean people. And here's the important thing. 2014 is when Crimea was absorbed into Russia. And if you take a look at what's going on in Russia, the reconstruction that's taking place, the rebuilding of infrastructure, Ukraine neglected Crimea because it was so Russian. They hated the Russian people there. They terrorized them. They didn't fund, the maintenance of Crimea. Crimea was crumbling into nothing. And what's happened since 2014 is Crimea is rebuilding itself, reemerging. And so I talk about Chechnya as the Chechen Miracle, about how people can come together. Crimea Miracle shows that when Russia says we are committed to Russia, that we will ensure that you have Russian standards, that you will be treated as a part of Russia, they mean it. Russia put their money where their mouth is. They didn't just build the Crimea Bridge for connectivity. They've built highways. They've built infrastructure. They've rebuilt crumbling buildings. They're making Crimea alive again. This is the promise. So now you cross over from Crimea into Kherson. You're in a war zone. Now you're in a different situation altogether. Didn't join Russia until the referendums in September, October of 2022. Mm-hmm. I got to meet the governor of Kherson. I told you, Alexander Zyryanov has the magic phone. And I had access to a lot of very important, influential people. It was a tremendous trip. But, Kherson, of course, is in the center of a war. The right bank of Kherson, the city of Kherson, is occupied by Ukraine right now. There's strikes taking place, heavy fighting on the river. But his number one priority wasn't the war. I mean, it's important. But this is a man who's just talking about rebuilding Kherson in the middle of the war at a critical time when that's all it's going to. His priority, and I got to meet the head of the Economic Development Agency of Kherson. They've received money, I think 300 million rubles last year, or $300 last year. It's been doubled, more than doubled, 700 million this year for investment. His first factory that he built was a concrete factory. and they went from one line to now they're building up to 6 lines. The one line I think produced 60 cubic meters of concrete per hour. With 6 times 6, that's I'm not a math genius, but that's a lot of concrete. What it means is that they're focused on pouring concrete, which is an essential element of reconstruction, of building. They're seeking to build in Kherson. So anybody who talks about the Russians are in there destroying, wreaking havoc, etc. No, the Russians are committed to bringing Kherson into Russia and making it part of Russia, which includes all the the infrastructure. He said, we have to, before we rebuild a society, we have to lay down the roads, then we have to build the hospitals, we have to build the schools, we have to build the institutions around which communities can be reborn. And that's his focus, that's his effort in this time of war. You drive through through Kherson, and you get into Zaporizhia. And Zaporizhia is, again, a war zone. You get to Melitopol, you see the Surovikin line, you see the dragon's teeth, the barbed wire. There are checkpoints everywhere because it is a place of war. In Zaporizhia, there's a region where the Ukrainians have installed the deep reconnaissance groups, these saboteur groups. Some people in the West, ISW, calls them partisan activity. And you'll see on the map, little purple zone, it says significant Ukrainian partisan activity. Whatever it is, it's there. And they attack. They call in strikes. One of the biggest fears, I had to operate because I'm on a couple hit lists from the Ukrainians, and they have been trying to kill me when I travel over there. And we have to take that threat seriously. So the people that I was with are professionals, and we made sure that when we traveled, we did so in unpredictable manners. We didn't stay in fancy hotels. We stayed in safe houses. We didn't stay in one place too long. My not American made, but Chinese made iPhone was turned off and put into a Faraday cage and locked and sealed so it could emit nothing. And we did that. And there's a reason. There was concern. The Russian government was fearful that somebody could ambush us on the road if they knew that I was traveling, or a HIMARS could come in and get me or something like that. So we had to be careful going through, especially Zaporizhia, because that's the territory, that's the oblast where the Ukrainians focused their counteroffensive on, coming through Robotyno to Tokmak to Melitopol. I had wanted to go to Tokmak. There's a couple units there that I was hoping to interview, but the Ministry of Defense put the kibosh on that, said, you ain't getting anywhere near the front line, boy. So I had to go to Melitopol instead. And then we moved on to Donetsk, the Donetsk People's Republic, Mariupol.
So you got to go to Mariupol, because I was going to ask, did you?
100%.
Mariupol miracle now. Mariupol.
I insisted on going to Mariupol, and they did not want me to go to Mariupol, but they went, okay. First of all, when you drive into Mariupol from the south, you're driving into the zone that where the Russians began the reconstruction. And so you're driving into a city that looks like it's just modern apartment blocks. There's no destruction. There in the apartment complexes, you have parks where you have children playground, you have schools, you have stores, gas stations. They just opened up this giant hospital, all first class, construction and all that. And you're just sitting there going, wow. And this is, and each one of those apartment blocks, it's military construction units started this. But what's happened is every district or oblast in Russia has sponsored. It's like, we sponsor this block. And so they provide the money and the materials, they pay for it to build it up. And this is why things are going up so fast, because all of Russia is committed to this task. This isn't like, we took Mariupol and then we're forgetting about it. Russia, the nation of Russia, the people of Russia are committed to this, and they are going to rebuild this city, and they are rebuilding this city. But I have to tell you, it's a hell of a task, because as you drive out of this reconstructed area, you enter a zone where some of the buildings are able to be preserved. Civil engineers have gone in, looked at the core, and said, we can save this building. It's not a matter of tearing it down and building new. We can actually refurbish it. And so you see active refurbishment, and they've been succeeding. Some of these buildings have been rebuilt. There's life there. there's cars, there's traffic, there's stores, there's people, things. But every once in a while, there's the building that can't be done, and it's a burned out hulk. And the further you progress into the city, the less there is of the rehabilitated buildings and the more you get of the hulks. Now, I drove through, you remember the history where you have the opera building that was, the Ukrainians claimed the Russians bombed it and all that. It's horse crap. It was brought down by Azov. The Azov guys are the most evil people on the planet. But it's being rebuilt. It's totally behind the screen right now. They're preparing that but they're rebuilding the city center, so it will be as glorious as it ever was. There's certain historical buildings that will not be allowed to be brought down. They will be rebuilt back to their former grandeur. But there's just so much of the place that is literally done. And again, when you talk to Adam Dilikanov and the other veterans of Mariupol, they talk about the house-to-house fighting that took place. They talk about again, it's just heartbreaking. These soldiers come in, and there's an apartment complex there, and they know that Azov's dug in. They've taken fire, they've taken casualties. Now, the smart thing to do is to pull back, call an airstrike, and take the building down. But they can't do that because they also know that in the basement, there's 50 to 70 to 100 civilians that Azov's holding hostage. And they know that the civilians are there because women will come running out saying, "Save us," and Azov will shoot them in the back and kill them and drop them. Then the child will run out to the mommy, and Azov will shoot the child. Maybe not kill him, maybe wound him, so he's screaming, so people have to run out and save him. Then they shoot them. This is the kind of scum that occupied Mariupol prior to the Russian liberation of Mariupol. But now they have to take this building. And so the first thing they have to do is they have to run across the open ground and get to the building itself. So they're under fire, taking casualties. They get to the building, they get to the basement, they find the civilians, and then they have to bring them out to safety. So you have the soldiers wrapping their bodies around the civilians and guiding them out, and they're getting hit with the bullets. Now, some of them have the vests on, and they're just taking the shot, but the vest doesn't cover everything. It's going through, hits you in the armpit, blows your heart out, you're dead, or it gets you in the neck, or it gets you in the balls, or it gets you in the back. And they're doing it, and they're dropping guys like flies, but they're saving these people. And now they come out, and they go in, and they clear the building, but they can't drop it. Why? Because in the basement, they said on the third floor is Mr. and Mrs. Smith. They're 70 years old pensioners, and they're trapped in their apartment. So now they got to go in. Now, if you read about the Battle of Aachen or any battle where Americans went into Germany and were fighting in the villages, they'll talk about how they go in the buildings and clear the buildings. And they'd go in and they just knock a door down, throw in a grenade, boom, come in, spray. And inevitably, there'd be a whole German family they just killed, and they didn't give a damn because they didn't care about the Germans. They didn't want to kill the German civilians, but it just was. They didn't care. Well, the Chechens and the Russian Marines and the Russian soldiers can't do that. They have to clear the building the way where they open it up, and they have to examine before they shoot because they don't want to kill the pensioners. And inevitably, there's an Azov guy waiting there going, bam, blows their brains off. So they have to come. They're taking heavy casualties. Every single building in Mariupol was captured this way. If people don't understand that, don't believe any of the shit you're hearing from the Ukrainians or anybody else, and I apologize for my bad language, but you see this, and you see the buildings, that are destroyed as a result of this because Azov set them on fire, or Azov created the conditions where the fighting had to consume the building. And then you get to Azovstal, and it is a nightmare. A utter nightmare. You see the destruction, and you realize that Azov was underground in this, that the Russians, the Chechens, had to go in there and fight inch by inch, not just above the ground, but have Azov pop up behind them. They're fighting the very war that the IDF was fighting in Gaza today, but the Russians won. They prevailed, but it cost them so much, so much. So you see this, and you're like, holy shit. And then as you drive through the north of Mariupol, and it's gone. It's finished. It is Stalingrad. There's no redeeming it. I mean, they'll have to tear that whole thing down and build it up again, but they will. That's the promise of what's happening here, is the Russians are going to do this. Then you get to Donetsk. Donetsk is a major city. It's a modern city. In fact, it was sort of the pearl of Donbass before the war began. They had that brand new airport, big high-rise buildings, the whole thing. I remember I met with a very well-known Colonel Khodakovsky, of the commander of the Slavic brigade. I met with him the day after I arrived there, and he thanked me. He said, I don't know what connectivity you have, but last night we didn't get shelled. So maybe it was the Ukrainians showing respect to you. And I'm like, well, I'll extend my stay. And he's like, no, you need to get the party. But so that night there wasn't shelling, but it's a city that, to give you an example, they tried to book me in a hotel and we didn't do it because I don't want to die, but more importantly, I don't want to be the cause of a strike that causes people to die. So we stayed in a safe house, and getting to the safe house, I'm not going to go through it, but there's ways to do it that you avoid being detected and all this crap. And we spent the night in the safe house. In the morning, you get up and we're getting ready to, well, that night we had to go to a meeting with Denis Pushilin, the head of the Donetsk People's Republic. But the way you have that meeting is just, again, shows the reality of it. We drive through Donetsk we're just told to start driving. Then you get a phone call and you're told to go to this place. And you get to that place and you get another phone call and you go to another place. And what they're doing is they're just looking for, because there's a lot of eyes in Donetsk that aren't friendly to Russia. And they're making sure that they're not being detected, that they're not being followed. And when the security people are comfortable, they say, okay, this is the spot. You go upstairs, and then Pushilin shows up with his people, and we had our meeting. Very informative meeting, very thorough discussion of the situation, of the of the reality on the ground, the goals and objectives, etc. But we're on the clock, and eventually his guys come in and go, "We're done. We've been here too long." And we're gone. We all split and we go our different ways. That's the reality of life in Donetsk. It's a war zone where the Ukrainians are actively trying to kill the head of the Donetsk People's Republic and anybody of note. But it's not just that. That morning, they started shelling again. They kill civilians. Every day, Donetsk gets showered with artillery fire that just slaughters innocent civilians, women, children, pensioners, men that aren't combatants. They're hitting marketplaces, schools, apartment buildings, places of business. You wake up in the morning, you can read about artillery fire. I mean, I've heard it before. I was an artillery officer, but it's one thing to read about it. It's another thing to hear it. So I woke up that morning. It's just like, boom, boom, boom. I'm like, whoa, shit. Okay. They're going, well, that's ours going that way. That's theirs coming in. They got, and as you're driving through the town and you're hearing, the multiple launch rocket system go off, you got a mother with a child. They're not flinching. The mother's walking with her child and they're not flinching. I'm going, what the hell's wrong with you? Why aren't you flinching? And, she didn't answer me because she didn't hear me say it, but her answer would have been, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm not going to flinch. This is our life. And that's the thing about Donetsk, the city. It's alive. It's full of people who are living despite of all the terror, despite of the fact that they don't know whether or not that moment an American-made HIMARS is going to land on them and kill them, or an American-made 155 millimeter cluster munitions going to land on and kill them, or other European-provided weapons are going to land on them and kill them. That's the reality. They die every day. They die sometimes in 1s, 2s, sometimes in 5s and 6s, but they die every single day in Donetsk because it's right on the frickin' front line. It's right there. And to see it, I mean, I was amazed because I just couldn't imagine a city where literally it's a modern functioning city. Cars driving, people living their lives under continuous artillery fire. They're not scared. They're not intimidated. These are people who are saying, we got to win this. We got to win this. And then we go on to Lugansk. Lugansk, the drive from Donetsk to Lugansk is heartbreaking because you see dead villages as you drive through villages that have been devastated. There's no life in them. Then the next village over is rebuilding. There's some life. Then another village has everybody alive. The randomness of war, the randomness of the violence comes alive. And you just realize just how utterly horrific war is and why war should never be allowed to occur. But it is occurring. We got to Lugansk and we were taken to the memorial to 68 children who lost their lives during the 8 years where Russia, stood by and let the Donbass fend for itself. And a lady was explaining this to me, and then she was talking, and she got tears in her eyes, and she was like, I love the Russians. I am Russian. I'm proud to be Russian. And I thank God every day for Vladimir Putin and the Russian soldiers that are fighting for us and sacrificing so much. But she said, why did it take you so long? Why did it take them so long? 8 years, 8 years, 68 dead children. Why did it take so long? There's some bitterness there. This is why I called it the gauntlet of redemption. You see, Russia has to redeem itself in the eyes of these people, and it is redeeming itself. Crimea proves that. Kherson proves that. Everybody in these 4 territories proves that there is this active thing of redemption. But, redemption requires hope, meaning that you have to believe not just in the potential of redemption, but in the actuality of it. And then we circle back to Chechnya. The Chechen Miracle is the proof. Russia can redeem itself because Russia has redeemed itself in the past, successfully so. And this was the invaluable aspect of this trip, because I never put this connection together. I could not have put this connection together had I not made this trip and seen this in person. For all those people out there who might call me a war terrorist, first of all, I wasn't allowed to be one. I wanted to be not a war terrorist, but I wanted to do interviews with I had 5 critical units that I wanted to interview, and they had approved. The commanders were ready. They had troops ready for me to come in and talk to them to get more insights about the conditions on the front line. But the security situation didn't permit it. And I'm not suicidal, and I don't wish harm on the people coming with me. So we didn't do that. But I learned more, actually, by avoiding that and focusing on the people of these 4 territories and their lives, and the efforts that are being done by Russia to improve their lives. I had to see it firsthand, and I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to do that. And I thank everybody in Russia, especially Alexander Ziriana, for giving me this opportunity. It was a unique opportunity. I hope someday to return to those territories, but I hope that when I return, that the war will be over, and it will be totally focused on the rebuilding of it to bring redemption to life.
I can't think of a better note to end this episode on than the idea of the Russian redemption through cooperation and rebuilding. It's just a really great story. And I hope that after Eastern Ukraine is rebuilt and Russia helps rebuild Syria. That would be just the icing on the cake. So thank you so much for joining me today, Scott. You gave me 90 minutes. Thank you. Please stay after the stream. I have to ask you a big favor, but let our listeners know where they can find you and what you're up to.
Well, what I'm up to right now is completing the mission of educating Americans about the reality of Russia. I call it Waging Peace. There's a couple aspects to Waging Peace. One is a documentary film that I'm in the process of finishing up. Documentaries are not free. They cost money. So if you want to support that, you can go to skyritterextra.com. There's a tab there, wagingpeace.fund, and you can donate. And I can promise you the money will go to a good, it will have a meaningful impact. I'm writing a book that's a sort of a companion to the documentary called Waging Peace. Again, it's sort of documenting what I call the search for the Russian soul. Again, because I think you can't understand Russia unless you understand the Russian soul. So it's a journey of discovery that mirrors the documentary film. And then Waging Peace is also an ongoing activity. I plan on going back to Russia many times to continue this individual diplomacy, civilian diplomacy. Again, people say, well, you're not a representative of the U.S. government. Hell no. But I am a representative of the American people because I am an American person. I'm not violating the Logan Act. I'm not, out there negotiating things that I'm not empowered. All I'm doing is going in and learning about the Russian people, showing them the courtesy, showing them the respect, and in the process, getting them to know more about me and about the United States, and breaking down the walls of distrust that are created by ignorance and fear. And so Waging Peace is an ongoing project. And the process of, I used to call it, I'd say I'm vaccinating people against the disease of Russophobia, but I don't know if that's the appropriate way to go anymore. So what I say is that I'm providing the antidote to the poison of Russophobia. I think people will understand. It's like being snake bit. You need an antidote to save yourself from the venom. And so waging peace is about providing the antidote to the venom of Russophobia. And it's an ongoing process. It's done through writing. It's done through podcasts such as this. And again, as Sarah will tell you, and anybody who does this, this doesn't happen on its own volition. It's a full-time job and needs support. So I never ask people for money. I don't hide anything behind a paywall. But I do have a Substack. You can subscribe to it for free. But if you'd like to help promote this Waging Peace campaign, you can also do a monthly subscription or an annual subscription, or you can just donate. None of this happens without that kind of support. So I appreciate any support anybody provides. But again, the purpose of this entire effort isn't to enrich Scott Ritter. The purpose of this effort to enrich you, the audience, with knowledge and information through this process. So even if you can't afford to donate, or you're not inclined to donate, please just read, just listen, participate, become part of the larger community. And in doing so, you make all of this effort worthwhile. So ScottRitterExtra.com, my Substack is there. Every interview I do is there. The wagingpeace.fund tab is there. And, we hope to have at least, part one of the movie done sometime by May, June. We've made a decision to, we're not seeking theatrical release. I had already done that with a movie, In Shifting Sands, about the lead up to the war in Iraq. And it had a successful theatrical run as far as documentaries go, but it's a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money to get it into theaters where thousands of people watch it. But if I can get a good product online and stream it, millions of people can watch it. So I think that's the route we're going, and we hope to have at least an initial segment of this documentary ready by May, June of this year.
Really quickly, do you have the bottle of vodka that they gave you? Is it nearby? So my listeners were asking. There it is, everybody. There it is. Wow.
That is from the Presidential Guard.
Well, it
but
doesn't.
That's not the best one. The best one is, of course, the Chechen presentation knife given to me by Opti. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, that's the real deal. That's so I came away with some swag. But
I'll say, well, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you, Scott. I don't know what we're doing next. I think Pepe is coming on sometime soon, maybe Chris Williamson. All right, thank you guys, and we will see you next time.